Welcome again to Orthodoxy Live, an ongoing mission that is a collaboration between the Departments of Christian Education and of Internet Ministries for the Eastern American Diocese of the Serbian Orthodox Church, with the blessing of His Grace Bishop Irene. Our goal each week is to bring interesting speakers and guests to share a little bit about the Orthodox faith with the world. And today our guest speaker is Popadija Jelena Vranic, who will be speaking on the topic, the role of music in Orthodox worship.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill to men. We praise Thee, we bless Thee, we worship Thee, we glorify Thee, we give thanks to Thee.
So now I'd like to welcome Popadija Jelena live from Washington, D.C. Good evening, Popadija.
Hello, Father. Nice to be here with you.
Well, it is a joy to have you. Welcome to Orthodoxy Live. For those of you who don't know, Popadija Jelena Vranic is a music teacher and choral conductor. She holds a degree in music education and theory from the Faculty of Music and University of Arts in Belgrade, Serbia, where she also completed graduate courses in music education before moving to the United States. While in Serbia, she worked as an assistant lecturer in elementary music education at the Faculty of Philosophy and Arts in Kragujevac, and she also directed the choir of St. George Church in Banovo Brdo, Beograd, and was an assistant conductor to Milica Manojlovic, director of the renowned children's choir Kolibri. In the U.S., Popadija Jelena has been working as an elementary general music piano and choir teacher. From 2013 to 2017, she was the director of the Serbian Singing Society Branko Radičević from Chicago. She now directs the newly established SSS Lyra of St. Luke's Orthodox Church in Washington, D.C. Popadija Jelena works as a general music teacher for the Montgomery County Public Schools and sings with the Cathedral Choral Society in Washington, D.C. And tonight we are excited to hear her lecture on the role of music in Orthodox worship. But before she begins, I'd like to remind all of you out there that the goal of Orthodoxy Live is not only to present topics live to all of you, but it's to offer a forum for interaction and engagement. So be sure to post your questions in the comments. I'll be monitoring our live feed throughout the talk. And if your question is on topic and appropriate, we will present it to Popadija Jelena to answer. So that being said, Popadija, I am turning it over to you.
Thank you, Father. It's a joy to be here and to speak to all of you on this, for me, very important topic of music in Orthodox worship. So we might ask ourselves, why is there music in our Orthodox services? And the answer is quite simple, because it has been a part of Christian worship from the very beginning. The Gospels tell us that singing was a part of the mystical supper. We read in the Gospel of Matthew that before his passion, Christ shared a meal with his disciples, and then, quote, when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. There is not a single liturgical service in the Orthodox Church that does not use chanting and singing extensively. Singing is not something only added to the prayer, it is the way we pray. Our liturgy begins with the words, "Blessed is the kingdom of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit." We experience this kingdom of God in the liturgy through all of our senses, through what we see, what we hear, smell, taste, and touch. It is an expression of the divine beauty in which we recognize the presence of God. And when we speak of this divine beauty that we experience, we come to the responsibilities of all of us who take part in creating what we hear in church and in our services. And that includes not only choir directors, but also the singers and the chanters. As one of my teachers once pointed out, we faithful seem to be more sensitive to the visual aspects of our church life, and we will notice and often protest if icons or frescoes are not of great artistic value, if vestments need mending or replacement. We will invest into decorating our churches with flowers and so on. However, we are often satisfied with listening to mediocre singing or chanting, and we don't feel the need to do anything about it. I believe that we are all called to strive for excellence in all aspects of Christian life and worship. Those of us who have been blessed with a musical talent and serve as directors, singers, and chanters, we have a big responsibility when taking part in creating the divine beauty that is the Orthodox worship. Our singing creates a unique dialogue with celebrants and represents the responses of all the faithful in church. Ideally, it should sound like a spontaneous conversation, a seamless flow. This task is not easy and it's not without challenges, but we must take courage and always strive to learn and improve. I personally see the responsibility of a church choir director as twofold, and a lot of this comes from my personal experience. There is the musical aspect of preparedness and skill, and there is also the liturgical aspect. When we speak of the musical aspect of what a church choir director's job is, one of the things that we need to do is select the appropriate repertoire. And I'm going to emphasize the word appropriate here. This could be a topic in itself, a whole lecture dedicated to it. But some of the considerations when we select the repertoire for a choir is the size and the skill of the choir, the size of the church, the occasion, the number of celebrants. And we also do have a duty to educate ourselves more on Serbian composers and repertoires. As choir directors in Serbian Orthodox Church, we all tend to go to the easy to get to and sometimes easy to sing Russian repertoire. But if we do not preserve our Serbian church music, there is nobody else to do it. So that's an endeavor for all of us choir directors. Another of musical skills that we need to have is to be able to teach and rehearse the choir. We have to be able to see the whole score and present it to our choir that is almost always comprised of amateur singers, and we need to teach them in a meaningful way so that they can retain it and bring it further to the service. We also need to be good musicians that we can hear and recognize when things go wrong. We need to know how to fix it. We need to be able to adjust musically to various unforeseen developments in the service. And the list is long of what could possibly require adjustment, from the pitch being changed for whatever reason, and how to adjust it to what I'm talking about, the pitch coming from the celebrant, right? And how to adjust what the choir is doing and how it will sound together, because this, as I said before, is a dialogue and it needs to sound like one thing, not the altar singing one thing and the choir being a whole different island and doing its own thing. We also need to adjust the repertoire sometimes based on, again, many different things. The situation in the church, the situation in the choir. Sometimes we want to sing that one cherubic hymn that we really like, but we don't have the singers to do it on a given Sunday. And then we come to the liturgical aspect of what a choir director needs to know and to do. The first thing that we need to know is the order of the service, and we need to be comfortable enough in it that we can guide our singers through the service without it feeling stressful and hard. We also need to know the typicon, so we know when changes in the service occur. We need to know this well ahead of time, because we need to select the hymns that change, we need to rehearse with the choir, and we need to be ready when it's time to sing those. We also need to be flexible to adjust to unexpected changes. Again, sometimes the changes can be expected if we know, for example, that the bishop is coming and we know how service is different when a bishop is serving. But oftentimes we have visiting clergy that we don't know will be there. Every clergyman has a little bit different style of serving, or it could be just the pitch that they take when they sing. And again, that is something that the choir director needs to adjust to. Also, there is always that question, will there be an additional litany that we have to recognize that it's there, or maybe a cutting of collage or a parastos or something that will happen. We need to be ready on the spot, because sometimes we know that it's coming and that it will happen, and sometimes we just see in the service that there are additions. And then both of these aspects of our skill and preparedness require a certain speed of reaction. We don't have time to think, to look at the book. We need to know on the spot. And it's not just a matter of us being ready to adjust to whatever is going on. We need to make a decision how we're going to react to it. We need to inform the choir, give a pitch, and then start. One of the most common comments or complaints, they are complaints, when people listen to the choir is when they hear the pitch that the director is giving too much. It is not the part of the service. It should not be heard too much. And all of this that we are doing should sound seamless. So it is our job to be quick and to adjust to whatever happens in the service. Directors have one more important role, and it doesn't have to do anything with the service itself, but it is very important, and it is to nurture fellowship among singers and to build trust and respect within the choir family. It is very important so everybody feels welcome and safe and wants to do their best and give their best. We're fortunate in our Serbian community that our choirs are well organized, so this task is shared between directors and choir boards. It is not only on the director. Unfortunately, there is not an easy way for a church choir director to get all the training that he or she needs for the job. Music skills can be obtained through general education and studying music. However, we do not have a good place or an extensive course or training to have our aspiring church directors go through and get educated enough in church music and liturgics. Some Orthodox jurisdictions in this country have programs to train their directors. There are also various conducting master classes that can help improve skills, but we still don't have a program that would fully meet the needs of Serbian choir directors. The Serbian Singing Federation offers annual weekend workshops, but unfortunately we do not have a more elaborate program to offer more in-depth learning and preparation. There have been some ideas and plans within our diocese's Department of Education. However, with our current health crisis, all those plans have been put on hold for now. And now that we have talked about the directors and we put quite a lot of pressure on them talking about their responsibilities and goals of excellence, it is time to look at a little bit bigger picture. Even the best prepared choir director cannot do the job by himself or herself. It is a joint effort, so we need to explore what other members of the community can do to help also. And of course, first we come to the singers. Singers have a huge responsibility. The first expectation of our singers is commitment. Commitment to the church, to the services, and the choir itself. Because choir is like an instrument, and singers are like keys on the keyboard. When a singer is missing, it's like a key missing on the keyboard. And don't forget that piano has 44 keys. I would love to hear of a Serbian Orthodox choir that has 44 members. So those of you who are singers, just think about that. Your instrument needs you and misses you when you are not there. Singers also need to be open to learn and to improve. When it comes to singing, habit is not our friend. Sometimes we get very sensitive when somebody tries to break a habit. Choirs need to develop their collective habits, and hopefully those would be the good singing habits. So we need to trust our directors, and we need to be open to hear them and to learn from them, and to improve our singing skill and adjust it to the choir as much as we can. Singers also need to have patience and grace to their fellow singers, and to the director as well, especially if the director is still learning their skill. Clergy also has an important role when it comes to music in our churches. Clergy, please find the time, work with your choir directors. You are most likely their best place to learn any liturgical skills that they're still developing. Have patience with them, dedicate time to help them improve, understand that their perspective is not the same as yours, and try to make an effort to see the service through their eyes. I am going to tell you a funny personal story about perspective. I have been in church my whole life. I think I know the service pretty well. And our son, when he was, I believe, 9 or 10, we were talking about the service, and we started talking about consecration of the gifts. And I thought I would stump him, and I asked him, but do you know the exact moment in the service when the consecration of the holy gifts happens? And from my perspective, of somebody who has been in church but in the choir and on the outside, the correct answer would be during Pepe Poem. But our son, who was at that time spending, I think, all of his time in church in the altar, he said, oh yes, I know, that's when Tata says. And then he started reciting the prayer that the priest says in the altar at that time. So that made me laugh quite a bit, because both of us had the correct answers, but his was meaningful to him, of course, and mine was meaningful to me, because I need to know what the choir does at that time. So we all have our different focus during the service, and sometimes explaining your focus doesn't really help the other person if their perspective is different. And then parishioners also have a big role when it comes to supporting the music in our churches. Show appreciation for your singers and chanters and directors. A vast majority of them are all volunteers, and that they dedicate their personal time to rehearse, to attend all the services, to make that commitment, oftentimes at their cost of their personal or family time. If you can, give compliments to the director and singers when you notice some improvement, or when you like something, or when the music moves you. It will mean the world to them, and it might be just that little nudge that shows them that effort they're putting into it is worth it. Support your choir at their events, and also an important thing that you can do for your choir is help connect potential singers with the choirs. Our church choirs are always looking for new members and for more support. So if you know of somebody in your community that might be a talented singer and somebody who would be interested in joining the choir, make sure to help the choir by making that connection. And now that we have covered all that we in our different roles can do for music in our churches, we need to look at our new reality brought on by this pandemic, and we'll deal with the fact that singing has been labeled as a high-risk activity. We're very fortunate in our diocese to have received a detailed guidelines from our bishop that show a great care for safety of our singers and directors. We need to be creative when we look for the solution and the way to move forward. The solution will be different for each choir and each church, and we need to take into consideration many different things. The size of our church, the size of the choir loft, the choir itself, comfort level of directors and singers, and so many other things. Some choirs might face the problem of not having enough singers to sing a 4-part harmony and will have to revert to chanting. Other choirs might have the problem of having too many singers to be able to sing safely all together. Another challenge will be to nurture the fellowship among singers that is so important, and the feeling of belonging to the group. There are some great initiatives on the global community level. There is a Facebook group, Virtual Singing Society, that creates virtual choir projects, but we also need to do something for our respective communities and choirs, and do something for them, whatever works for your group. And in conclusion, I would like to applaud all who commit their time and talent to beautifying our church services. We sing with prayer on our mind, love in our heart, and commitment to do our very best, both as individual singers and as part of the choir group. We do this for the benefit of our respective church communities and also to do our part in preserving our beautiful Serbian music and traditions.
That was a wonderful talk. I have to tell you, it reminded me so much of learning about liturgical music at seminary, and my eyes as a person without a music background being open to many of the things that you just spoke about, but we often go to church and take for granted all the work and effort that goes into this. And I think this was a wonderful topic and a wonderful talk. So thank you so much. And we do have a couple of questions. Before I ask them, I'd like to remind our Facebook audience to please put some questions in the feed, or you're welcome to text me or direct message me, and I will ask those questions as well. But we did get a couple that came in. First was about pacing in music. Somebody said that they have been to some services that go at a slow tempo, and it has a completely different feel than something that is at a faster tempo. And they noticed this most with the singing of the Paschal Troparion. So maybe if you have a moment to speak on pacing in music.
Sure. I am not sure without hearing it, the comment about the Paschal Troparion. But generally, the question of pacing is very important. I called it flow, not pacing, but in my opinion, the pacing is very individual. It depends on the celebrant and the choir itself. Some choirs have more flexibility and are able to sing faster. Some choirs feel more comfortable singing slower. It has to be a logical pace connected with how the priest and the deacon, or just the priest, how the celebrants are serving. Because if the celebrant is using more syllabic and more talking-like manner in his petitions and prayers, then it doesn't make sense for the choir to respond with a super long Gospodi pomiluj or Lord have mercy to a fast-paced petition before that. However, if the priest or a deacon is singing more melodically, more slowly, then the choir should adjust. One thing that does happen often is that those two are not in sync. And that is something that I think choirs should work on, to adjust their singing to how the celebrant is serving, and to try to make that a cohesive pace, that there are not too many changes, that one part is very fast and then the other is very slow. Imagine trying to breathe along and pray along to that music. It is not easy if it doesn't have a steady pace. So my suggestion would be always try to adjust to how the celebrants are serving and make sure that it sounds like one whole and not an argument between the altar and the choir.
We did have a question come through, and I think it is one of those intersections between a choir director and kind of pastoral work and the nature of the role of a choir director. And that is, how might one approach a situation where a singer's heart might be completely there, but maybe the voice is not quite there yet as part of a group? Does that question make sense as I'm asking it?
Yes, it does make sense. I think we've all been in that situation and all had to deal with something like that. It is not an easy decision to make. It needs to be carefully addressed, I believe. As church choirs, we want to be as inclusive as possible, and we do not want to push anybody away. On the other hand, there is a level of ability to be a part of the choir, so there needs to be musical talent and the vocal ability. to be a part of the group. I have had situations where I didn't have the heart to turn a singer away, and I worked really hard on the side to help them improve. I think honesty is the best. Telling a singer you need to listen more, or sing softer, or even just listen for a while. It does put that pressure on you to as a director, to try to work a little bit more individually with the person. And then with some individual work, it even becomes more clear to the person if they are improving and can join the group, or if there is no improvement. Sometimes after a while they realize by themselves. So I would suggest, gently, with care, and with a little bit of effort on both sides to help the person try to improve if possible.
We also were asked about, and you did touch on this, particularly in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what are some ways, once we are back together as a community, that we can build trust and cohesion in choirs, particularly where you have new people coming into maybe a more established group?
Mm-hmm. I think generally the future of choirs and singing with this COVID situation is a big unknown. I don't feel educated enough to talk about this, and the information that we receive changes. It is going to be a challenge. What can we do to come back together as singers safely? We will need to take some measures of precaution. As I said, we have our guidelines that give certain, in our diocese, we have the guidelines that tell the choirs, some things on how we should adjust, how we are singing. Ultimately, we will have to do what is the best in our respective churches and parishes, because the size of the choir matters. Smaller choirs have it easier right now because they need less space to be able to give each other a little bit of room. Bigger choirs will have to adjust even more to that. In respect of welcoming new singers, I think we'll just have to wait and see, because as far as I know, right now choirs are not singing together the way they used to before all of this started.
And we've got questions flowing in now, so I think a lot of people are feeling very, a lot of wonderful things about the presentation, but it's evoked a lot of questions, and they're very good ones. One being, the choir director is such an important position in the life of the church with a lot of responsibilities, but choir directors cannot be there every Sunday. So a question was asked, just from a personal experience, how do you handle situations where you cannot be there to conduct choir, although you are the primary conductor?
Mm-hmm. So that is a very, very important and practical question. Choir directors need to have some backup, a substitute, because it is not realistic to expect a choir director to be there all the time. There should be assistant choir directors or associate choir directors. Ideally, there could be some, depending again on the choir and on the situation. Maybe you already have somebody who is well-versed in music and choir repertoire, who knows the service well enough, that can cover for you, and maybe just needs that little nudge to try directing. And assistant choir directors do not have to be as skilled as full-time, so to say, choir directors, because they would not rehearse the choir or something like that. But somebody who can also cover the services for you, who can help here and there, and also personally grow in the process. If you have a young singer who is talented and interested in music and is doing music courses in high school or in college, those are the perfect candidates, in my opinion. Our youth needs to take more role. They love the opportunities to get more prominent roles, and that is also how we keep them in and show them we want you, we need you, we value you, and we are willing to invest in you. So if you can find somebody within your choir like that that you can help grow, that is a wonderful thing also. So try to find somebody within your community. Hopefully every choir has at least one person who could step in and help out the choir director.
Beautiful. And we had a question, how do you instill commitment, or maybe some strategies for instilling commitment in a choir for practices and for perhaps being timely to church services and so forth?
Again, not an easy one, but I think what worked for me personally is I am so passionate about choir singing and directing and bringing excellence to the services that I work so hard that ultimately my singers told me, well, we are embarrassed to not to do our best when you are working so hard. So sometimes it is the personal example. Sometimes it's just setting the expectation. Because if there is no expectation that everybody will be in church on time, then some people might not think that it's so important. So as long as you try to tell your singers, it is important, we should be there from the first Amen and not from Sviati Bože as a full choir. And just talk about that importance of the role, and that it's a joint effort. It is not about the director being there, and maybe sometimes singers will say, oh, but every section was covered, what does it matter? It's, try to share the story about choir as an instrument and the missing keys. It is not my analogy. One of my wonderful mentors, Milica Manojlović, late Milica Manojlović, who directed Choir Kolibri, she used to explain to the children why it's important to be there every practice, and if they have to miss, that they have to let her know, so she knows that she will be missing a key and she needs to adjust. So I think building relationships and building the choir family helps with all of these other things, the commitment, the timeliness, the coming regularly, all of that. It's not a quick process. There is no quick fix as far as I know. I would love to know if there is one, but it's our joint work, and it's setting the expectation and showing with your own example.
Okay, I think we have time for one, maybe two questions. One person asked, how do you feel about sacred liturgical music that is from a contemporary composer? I am not too connected with contemporary composers, but I suspect you might be. What are your thoughts on this? Somebody is just curious to know.
So I will tell you that my fascination right now is a contemporary composer. It's a nun from Minsk, Belarus, who is also a professional musician, a composer and conductor. For me personally, it is not the question of when was the music composed. It is the question of how appropriate is this music for our service. And the appropriateness might be different for different communities. There might be communities that are open to new sound, open to something different, and there might be traditional communities who really enjoy the most something that is familiar to them, or at least it doesn't have to be the exact composition that's familiar, but just the sound in general. Liturgical music needs to be good for the service, so to say. It needs to be composed with the service in mind, not just as a sacred piece intended to be performed on the stage or in the church. If it is composed for the service, if the composer has the service in mind and in their heart, it will be appropriate and it can be presented in the service. This nun, Yuliania Denisova, that I mentioned at the beginning, she is a nun, and she's also a professional musician. And I think that's part of my fascination with her music, because it is, the music is very deeply spiritual, and you can feel it even in the most simple harmonies and melodies, but you can feel her spirituality. And then on the other side, the music itself is so masterfully and skillfully composed that it's just a perfect blend for what we are looking for our services.
Wonderful. And we have time for one more, although the questions do keep coming in. I think we're going to have to possibly invite you back in the not too distant future. You're certainly getting a wonderful response, and you can always tell that by the quality and the number of questions that come in. But one that came in a while ago that I hadn't yet gotten to was somebody had asked about, in some jurisdictions, there is support, background support with, say, an organ or some sort of instrumental. And this person was unsure of why that is, how that is, maybe why we don't, or why another jurisdiction does, or anything you might know about that scenario.
I have to be honest and say that the first time I heard an organ in an Orthodox church was when I came to this country. And I was surprised. I didn't ask much. I am not sure why it is done. I know that it is not part of our tradition, and I have never heard an instrument as part of the service in the Orthodox Church. So I really don't know much about how and why other jurisdictions do it.
I'm afraid I don't either, so I was hoping. But thank you so much. We have questions, multiple questions that keep coming in. And maybe when this is over with, if you have some time to look at the Facebook feed and reply to some of those questions. But to those who asked questions that did not get answered, I encourage you. Father Protodeacon Jovan and I are already planning to invite Popadija Jelena back. Hopefully she will take us up on that. You did such a wonderful job this evening and shared so many wonderful answers to questions in a lecture with us. So thank you again for taking the time to be here with us this evening. And please be sure, for everybody out there in Facebook land, to please follow our diocesan Facebook page so you can join us every week, Sunday evening at 7 p.m. And for those who have more questions for Popadija Jelena, God willing, you'll see her here again on Orthodoxy Live. Popadija, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes,